Bryant and Kenzie in the morning. And Chicago's alternative all day.
Q101.
Kenzie's Krimes.
Milwaukee police found body parts in a North Side apartment.
Not because I was angry with them, not because I hated them, but because I wanted to keep them with me.
Believe me, if I started murdering people, there'd be none of you left.
This is evil, what those people have done to me.
She says Heaven's Gate awaiting.
I'm not guilty.
Q101.
Bryant and Kenzie on Q101 with another edition of Kenzie's Krimes, a deep dive into a local murder, mystery, drama. What do we got today, Kenzie?
Now, this one has been on my list for a very long time. Hands down, the most submitted request that we've had. And I think the second I start talking about it, everyone's going to remember where they were when they heard the story. But I'm sure that I have a lot more details and an even deeper dive that you didn't know about.
Okay.
All right? 42-year-old Rhoda McFarland was a U.S. Air Force veteran and was the store manager at a Lane Bryant in Tinley Park.
Oh, I know this story.
At 10 a.m. on the morning of Saturday, February 2nd, the Lane Bryant Tinley Park opened, and Rhoda was the one to open that. Within 8 minutes of opening, a man walked into the store posing as a delivery driver. One of the part-time employees who was on the floor actually asked him if he was in the right store, looking to lend a helping hand. It was said that he glanced at the ceiling as if searching for security cameras. There weren't any. He proceeded to pull out a gun and announce that this was a robbery. Due to the early morning, there was only $200 in the register. I mean, they'd been open for a couple minutes, right? He took the women to the cash register and proceeded to get angrier as the women didn't respond to his liking during the robbery. I'd also imagine the lack of money in there probably added to his frustration. Now, during the robbery, 2 customers walked into the store. He brought the 4 women to the back room, the 2 customers, as well as the general manager and the part-time employee. He ordered them to empty out their purses and bind themselves with duct tape that he himself brought. During this time, 2 more customers entered the store. Those 2 women were also forced into the back room. They were ordered to empty their purses and bind themselves with the other women. What horrible timing. Isn't that just, ugh.
Yeah.
Could you imagine just walking into that scenario?
Ugh.
That's one of those, like, if you woke up 2 minutes later that day things, you know, it's so crazy. Now, a string of hope happened. The robber walked out of the room, and Rhoda, mind you, who was a previous U.S. Air Force veteran, was able to free her hands.
Man.
She was able to get out, but this is how amazing this woman was. She freed her hands, and instead of running out, which she could have done, he was in the front room, she was in the back, and she freed her hands. She could have gotten out. She decided to call 911 at 10:44, which I think a lot of people probably would have ran out of the store and then obviously called for help. They wouldn't have just carried on about their day.
Yeah.
But it's a natural instinct to try to get out. She stayed there with the other women and called for help. Police were able to arrive at the store within several minutes because they were answering a call actually at a Target like 300 yards away.
Good Lord.
I'm actually going to pause right there because this gets even more insane than it already is. And the mystery behind this has to be one of the most shocking parts. So I'm leaving you. She just called 911, and we have the 911 call that she placed, and you can hear his voice, and it is so bone-chilling. So we get back, we're going to have that and the extra details on this case, which are so crazy.
That's all coming up in 3 minutes with Bryant and Kenzie on Q101.
Bryant and Kenzie in the morning. And Chicago's alternative all day.
Q101.
Bryant and Kenzie on Q101 with the conclusion of Kenzie's Krimes and one of the most infamous and tragic crimes in Chicago history without question.
We've been contacted so much about the Lane Bryant murders. So there was 6 women, 4 were customers, 1 was a part-time employee, and 1 was Rhoda McFarland, who was actually a previous U.S. Air Force veteran and was the store manager. They'd all been brought into a back room by this murderer. Rhoda actually managed to get her hands free and call 911, which is insane. Thank goodness this call, was placed. This call was placed at 10:44 a.m. And Brian, we have the phone call, so I would like you to play it.
911 emergency.
So it's crazy because not often in the 911 phone calls are you able to identify a voice. Now, listen, you may be like, well, that's hard to identify. But if you know someone or have an inkling and then you hear it, anything helps if someone's trying to piece something together themselves, right?
That's wild.
Now,
Wild.
cops were able to arrive within several minutes of this phone call being placed because they were 300 yards away responding to a Target incident, obviously not as serious as this one. Unfortunately, the gunman had already fled the scene. The 4 customers and Rhoda, the general manager, had been shot and killed by this time.
Insane.
The part-time employee, whose name has never been released in order to protect her, had a gunshot to the neck. Now, when he shot, luckily she kind of just moved a little bit. That slight movement saved her life. So even though she had a shot to the throat, she did survive. And despite the trauma and the wounds, she was able to give a very incredibly detailed description of the killer. The shopping center was placed on a lockdown while searching for the shooter, and it reopened when they confirmed he was no longer within the area. They found fingerprints and shell casings on the scene. Now, this is important to note. It's really important, for detectives to try to figure out, was this planned? Was it random? Motives. This robber overall seems a bit inexperienced. It would happen on a Saturday, which you don't really want to do because it's the busiest time. It happened at a shopping center, which is obviously more crowded because it's more than one store. He placed the robbery in a morning, which you would think would have less money, and in this case, it did. So this seemed a bit desperate, right? He also made a couple huge mistakes. One, no mask over his face at all. Shell casings and fingerprints found at the scene. He did this in a very, very messy way, right? So it seems like desperation. A lot of people have pulled, maybe this was wanting drug money in the morning because it seems so desperate and so random. Investigators scoured the area. They did deep dives into the investigation. They were scanning even across the sides of the highways, looking for things thrown that they could attach to this person, maybe an old license plate so they could find the vehicle. Nothing was ever found. Now, the fingerprints, they did submit those. There was no match in the system, which is crazy because usually if you do something like this, you've probably committed a crime prior. This usually wouldn't be your first crime. 5 years later, they've claimed that they have chased leads as far to London. Okay, they have traveled for these leads and still have had zero luck. A decade after the murder, they have new technology which allows them to make a 3D image of the suspect, which is really cool because obviously a 3D face looks so different than the flat image you see on paper, and that is still available. Because fingerprints were found on the scene, they do believe as technology progresses, they'll be able to find him because obviously every year things come out that you just can't believe are going to happen. The image can be found at tinleypark.org as well as the tip line for the reward, which is up to $100,000. So that's still available. The 3D image, the tip line, $100,000, and the $100,000 is not based upon conviction. Now, Lane Bryant did donate half of that $100,000 reward. They also paid for the funerals of the 5 women who passed away in this tragic event. Jennifer Bishop of South Bend, Carrie Chuso-Hudick of Frankfurt, Rhoda McFarland of Joliet, Sarah Safransky of Oak Forest, and Connie Wolfork of Flossmoor were all victims of this heinous crime. Again, that tip line is still open. The image is still available. The reward is still there. If you can give these families justice or closure, please do so. If you have any information, again, this happened February 2nd, 2008 at Tinley Park.
Mind-boggling that this happened 17 years ago. Mm-hmm. And as to your point, it was an inexperienced criminal.
Yes.
And he's still out there. He could be listening right now.
I know. Even the recording of his voice is available.
Unbelievable.
Kenzie's Crimes.
Milwaukee police found body parts in a North Side apartment.
Not because I was angry with them, not because I hated them, but because I wanted to keep them with me.
Believe me, if I started murdering people, there'd be none of you left.
This is evil, what those people have done to me.
See, says Heaven's Gate away team.
I'm not guilty.
Q101.
Well, there you have it. Wild. That was Kenzie's Crimes on the Lane Bryant murders. One of the most iconic and huge tragedies in Chicago that still exists because, as we just said, there and Kenzie brought that information. Mm-hmm. The 911 call and everything was amazing, Kenzie, and about how still out there, never solved 17 years later.
Yeah.
Real tragedy, but you can get on the podcast. If you caught it at the end, make sure you catch up on there, the Bryant and Kenzie podcast.
If you have any information, even anonymously, hit up that tip line and, help these families get closure.
Yeah.
They deserve it.
What'd you get? You get a text from someone just now?
Yeah, so 630 texted in and said, I do crime scene cleanup, and I actually cleaned up the Lane Bryant store after the crime was committed and the investigation was complete.
Wow.
Isn't that insane? He said he's been doing it for 17 years.
Incredible.
And then 708 texted in and said he worked on the task force for that case. So this is how local this, I feel like everyone has some type of connection. You knew somebody's family member involved who worked on the crime scene, who cleaned it up. Every time you bring up, I always feel like the Lane Bryant and the Browns
Chicken Massacre.
and the Browns Chicken Massacre are the ones where people always know someone. Remember where they were, like
They're recent enough in the last 20-some
Yes.
years where somebody knows somebody. But
Totally.
So there you go. That is Kenzie Krimes every week, Tuesdays at 8:20, and that's on the podcast later on. Case will get that up.
Brian and Kenzie in the morning. And Chicago's alternative all day.
Q101.